the Jimmy Dore Cornel West thing recently was good and bad. It definitely shook my view of Cornel West as a presidential candidate. I'm not going to lie. And then the Peter Dow thing after that shook it even harder, because it really did look like there's someone trying to create a rift between Jimmy Dore, who is a guy who has been correct about everything, just and I use the term sufficiently militant, sufficiently skeptical. Misty is another one who I will hats off all day long to Misty, because she's all these people. I got mad. I used to get mad at Misty, like, oh, come on, Misty, calm down. Like, you're always such a downer, Misty. No, they're right. They're sufficiently skeptical, sufficiently militant about and you have to be. Remember all the language about purity tests, everything, like, oh, you want to have a purity test. You kind of have to have one, because as soon as you get to a point where, when it comes down to like where the rubber meets the road, and you got a bunch of Kyles who will just flip for the cash, they don't care about the actual cause. They're in it for the scratch, And listen, our society is built around that, so everyone's in it for themselves to some degree. Like, I'm not naive, everybody's got to make something, even Jimmy makes money on what he does. But the difference is, I don't see Jimmy pretending to believe shit that he knows is bullshit, that it's visibly true that he knows is bullshit, just to get money. Like, Jimmy gets money because he's legit and he's authentic, and he gets out in the fucking clubs and talks to people and shakes hands. He's like a fucking real organizer type of guy. Love him or hate him, he's in the streets with the people. He's at the fucking rallies. He's out doing comedy in clubs, brushing shoulders with people and talking to people. Jimmy is in the fucking streets. So you can say what you want about him, but that's how he makes his money. On the other hand, you have these fucking grifters like the Vanguard kids, coming out of their treehouse every time they want to every time Jimmy Dore needs to be criticized by some 12-year-old douchebags who fucking shouldn't have put their video game down to begin with. And it's becoming evident in the indie media circles who's who. You know what I mean? You can see the force the vote thing was a very, very critical moment in defining who really cares about the politics of the day and moving progressive issues forward, and who is just in it for the fucking scratch. Because all the people who got their hands on that Katzenberg money are out there like, oh no, guys, we don't want to upset Pelosi. Oh, da, 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 da. So Cenk sitting there talking, that's another Freudian slip he made there about Pelosi. Jimmy never said anything about Cenk taking money from Pelosi ever. All he did was point out that Clinton donor stuff. So anyway, Max Blumenthal has the best take, I think, of anyone on the Jimmy Dore Cornel West interview. And the reason I think that he has that is, well, first of all, he's friendly with both of those men in a different context, in different, like, on different levels. Like he was, I'm sure Max was friendly with Cornel before he even knew who Jimmy Dore was, but obviously he has a close friendship with Jimmy Dore as well. And I will agree. I saw someone, I think in the comments somewhere, it might've been on one of Willie Bragg's videos recently, and they were saying that there was definitely a clear difference between the way that Jimmy treated Cornel versus the way that Jimmy treated RFK. And I think that's crystal clear. Like the tone, and I think that's because Jimmy affords RFK that, because he's speaking out against other issues. I think that's but Jimmy did go at him for the fucking Israel stuff. He didn't just throw him softballs the whole time. Anyway, I think Max here makes the best case of anyone that I've heard. So I want to share his views a little bit and talk about them, because I really do think that Max, of anyone that I've seen speak on it, has kind of the best take.
So wanted to conclude, but I do want to address one super chat because it was something I wanted to talk about. I'm not really prepared with all of the elements, but this is Buckeye Fan 05. Care to comment on the recent developments of the Cornel West camp? And this is a reference. I really wish I had all the video elements here to illustrate some of the points I want to make. I want to try to make it quick. But there's obviously a reference to Jimmy Dore's interview with Cornel West, in which Jimmy Dore was, I mean, it got very testy and antagonistic. And Jimmy Dore was challenging Cornel West's not his messaging around his presidential campaign and saying, I don't know who's advising you here. It seems like your advisor is some kind of infiltrator because the messaging you're using is just no one understands what you're saying, and it's going to only appeal to a tiny slice of the electorate and is going to alienate everyone else.
And there is, frankly, RFK is proving that there's a real opportunity to bring people. I mean, even on my TikTok stuff that I post, I have people that are conservative coming on, like commenting and stuff. And, you know, it's like, we might not agree on some social issues. That's fine. I think you can move the ball forward on those with conservatives just by coming together on some of these, like the Ukraine war, for example, where a lot of the conservatives are against funding the Ukraine war. You know, the progressive left and conservatives can come together on that. And then as a progressive left person, you can speak to conservative people and say, hey, look, you know, like, you might not be cool with gay marriage or the gay lifestyle, but you also have to understand that it's none of your business. And as long as no one's forcing it on you or your children, leave it alone. And I think that's a fair argument to make. You know, if people get self-righteous about their kids, and they should, you know, people are defensive about their families, but also I feel like a lot of this stupid shit gets pushed in a divisive manner where it's like, when you really dig into the realities, conservatives, especially now at this point, are not anti-gay. They're just, you know, being dragged by this leash with all the divisive stuff in the media. And if you really ask a conservative, hey, at this point, they've come around to the being the, you know, freedom. And you can make an argument. I like to bend arguments that conservatives use around to show them the point. Like the best example I could give of that is the vaccine bodily autonomy versus bodily autonomy for abortion rights, where it's like, okay, look, now you understand this, dickhead. You don't want the vaccine and you shouldn't be forced to take it if you don't want it, because it should be your choice, your body, your choice. Just like a woman's baby is her body, her choice. Until a fucking, you know, you have to carry a baby, it's none of your goddamn business, dude. So I understand that your religious values say that babies shouldn't be killed. Mine do too, you know, but no one gets abortions just at will and on a whim as birth control. And if they do, they shouldn't have babies anyway. Anyway, I got way off the rails here. Let's listen to Max's take on this.
If you're just saying we need to stop Trump, the neo-fascist white supremacist, and then kind of treating Biden with kid gloves, and Jimmy was predicting that he was going to basically endorse Biden. And I think Jimmy's made some more articulate points since the interview took place, but it was such a reveal. It was a very revealing look at Cornel.
Jimmy is sufficiently militant, sufficiently skeptical, sufficiently critical. We've been grifted several times. Like, after 2 rounds of Bernie Sanders taking all the working class money and funneling it into the Democratic Party, he has a right to be angry and be like militantly critical of candidates out there doing the circuit, trying to get that sweet donor money.
West as a presidential candidate. I like Cornel personally. He's been very encouraging of my work. I really like what he did at the tail end of the Obama era. I think what he did in 2015 was extremely appropriate.
Cornel deserves respect. He's a guy who is legitimate on so many levels.
Just addressing how Barack Obama had failed Black America specifically, but had sold out all of his 2008 promises, which I knew he was going to do. And I really appreciate Cornel West calling out Ta-Nehisi Coates, this pet project of the liberal establishment, as their fake James Baldwin, who was going to represent himself as some kind of radical Black intellectual.
I love Max for that kind of shit right there. that like tough guy intellectualism. Like Max is like a smart tough guy, and I fucking love that. Fake James Baldwin.
Just being a hagiographer for Obama, who also was completely talentless. And Cornel West showed that, he was the emperor had no clothes. But the same thing can be done to Cornel West. He needs to realize that if he's going to run for president, he has to be held accountable. And this needs to be recognized about Jimmy Dore. Jimmy Dore has held accountable everybody who's running for president who has interviewed with him. I think Jimmy is sympathetic to RFK Jr. because of his stance on the Ukraine war and on COVID. Those are two of Jimmy's main issues. But he still held him accountable on Israel and brought me on. And it kind of knocked the wind out of his sails, at least with the anti-war and anti-establishment left. Jimmy didn't have to do that. He held Marianne Williamson accountable on the Ukraine war. And so why is he supposed to give Cornel West a free pass when Cornel West is using this very arcane boutique left language and speaking purely in boilerplate? I'm going to stand up against white supremacy and homophobia and male supremacy. And that's what a true revolutionary does. And he's not offering any political program at all. At all. I don't see anything. And so I think it was entirely appropriate for Jimmy to hold him to account and to force him to address some of the kind of contradictions in his actions and his rhetoric.
The way that CJ and Nick and the RBN guys reacted to the Peter Dow thing, to me, totally validated everything Jimmy did too. And not that I don't think Jimmy could have handled it. I think Jimmy could, like, when he gets frustrated, he can't hide it. He's not good at like managing his emotions. I mean, I'm not either, so I'm not faulting him for that. But yeah, it's like he just gets upset, and then the whole thing turns into a shouting match instead of like, I think Rogan is good at, is a good example of someone who does that well, because Rogan will ask people questions and just kind of like nod. Like a good example is when he interviewed Bill Maher recently, and Bill Maher was like going in on Trump, and Rogan's just kind of like you can tell he's like, no, that's not right. But he's like, but he's just like, yeah, why do you think this? And he just keeps asking him questions. And I saw Rogan has dismantled so many people that way. Like Barry Weiss, he dismantled Barry Weiss over Tulsi Gabbard that way. Just, why is she what's a toady? Why is she a toady for Assad? Like, what does that mean? And he did the same thing to Ben Shapiro with gay marriage. It was so funny. He's like, what about Ben, or not? Maybe it wasn't Ben Shapiro. It might've been that other guy, Matt Wallace or Matt, I don't even remember the guy's name. The What Is a Woman guy. But anyway, Rogan is I think does a better job of kind of like breaking these people down by just asking them questions, where Jimmy's more like me. He gets kind of like, what the fuck? So I can relate. Anyway, back to Max. Max's incredibly well-spoken breakdown.
Where Biden is president now, and Cornel West doesn't seem to be running against Biden. All of his rhetoric is directed against, much of his rhetoric, or the disproportionate
against Trump
amount of it, is directed against Trump. Here's what I think was exposed through this exchange. And I mean, most people are focusing on some rancorous exchanges at the beginning, but it's important to go towards the end, where Jimmy challenges Cornel West on his view of the Trump indictments and of the whole campaign to basically prevent Donald Trump from running for office. And what Jimmy's talking about is what many people call the deep state. You call it the national security state, but it's basically the rigging of democracy to prevent a candidate who's seen as a rogue, just as Bernie Sanders in some ways was, and as Cornel West would be if he actually was threatening the establishment as a presidential candidate, using the law to prevent him from running for office, just finessing all of these indictments. And then, finessing indictments that sentence Proud Boys to over 20 years in prison for riots that they didn't even participate in. And Cornel West, he said, well, I'm in deep solidarity with the people in Cop City who are getting hit with the RICO Act, the way Trump is, but I'm not in deep solidarity with Donald Trump. I'm not in deep solidarity with the Proud Boys. So I don't care about that. And then he accuses Jimmy of supporting Trump because he brings those issues up.
I am serious. And don't call me
And that's
Shirley.
the problem with Cornel West's presidential campaign. It's not about your deep solidarity. It's about the system that we're living under, and it will hurt the people that you're in deep solidarity with, but it's using the people that are more threatening to it at the current moment, at this impasse, in order to set a new standard for prosecuting protest. And Cornel West won't even address that because they're white supremacists or transphobes or homophobes. Right now, you have such a huge opportunity in this country, if you're an anti-establishment independent candidate, to reach out to people who just want to give the system a giant middle finger because they see that it's been against them since they lost their homes during the foreclosure crisis, since that they see it's against them because it's giving hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine and the people in Hawaii got $700 each. They see that it's against them because their preferred candidate, Donald Trump, is being targeted with lawfare and was falsely branded as a Russian agent for years and years with no evidence at all. So Cornel West is not running an anti-establishment campaign that can reach out to those people and actually, if he sees them as white supremacists or fascists, well, if they hear him and they say, well, wait a minute, this guy's making sense, that would be building a bridge. Instead, he's dismissing them all and only addressing people with whom he's in deep solidarity, which is a tiny group of boutique left activists in a blue area of the country. And so I said to Cornel directly that your rhetoric might be good for the old Brecht Forum, which was a defunct activist space in New York, but real serious independent candidates like Ralph Nader, for example, in 2000, they made waves and threatened the establishment by putting together a real political program. And it was based on class, not all of the identitarian issues. Obviously, we can't discount identity for Black Americans. That's a huge factor, but it's bound up in class. But if you're running for president, you should be running for president of everyone. And we're in it at a point, a terminal phase of neoliberalism, where I think there's a huge opportunity for an independent candidate to actually build an anti-establishment coalition. What Cornel West wants to do is just keep this confined to the boutique left, do some virtue signaling. And, unfortunately, I think he needs to be asked whether this is just about, a vanity project, because of course the system's rigged. So why would anyone run for president except maybe for vanity? That's a valid question. He needs to be asked that. And so what he does, his response, and this is, the question that I'm addressing here. I'll just put the question back on screen. Care to comment on the recent developments of the Cornel West camp? His response has been to sick, sympathetic voices against Jimmy Dore.
Yeah.
To attack Jimmy Dore. First, that's the first response, to viciously attack Jimmy Dore. But when Anderson Cooper was much more condescending with Cornel West, or Ari Melber criticized Cornel West for wanting to withdraw from NATO, and they kind of called him a kook, did he send his supporters against them? No. He was like brother Ari and brother Anderson. He's been much more hostile to Jimmy Dore because Jimmy Dore hit the nail on the head. And so Cornel West runs the risk now of becoming a caricature as a presidential candidate, whereas he had consolidated his reputation as a academic and activist, but he's in a different realm now. And Jimmy Dore is the one who threatens his image by actually asking serious questions about the contradictions in his messaging and how he's out of touch. Another area where he's been out of touch is the COVID event, the pandemic. Cornel West has never retracted his statement praising Anthony Fauci as some kind of heroic figure. He refuses to address what the lockdowns did to Black America specifically, to Black public school students, setting them back for a generation by putting them in remote learning, setting their families back, to Black women who were forced to, in some cases, quit their jobs because they now had children at home who were remote learning, who could not go to school. The threat that and the insanity of the vaccine mandates, throwing people out of their jobs for refusing to inject a substance in their body that did not prevent infection or transmission. He just won't go there. So he's lost in 2015, like so much of the left, like so much of the boutique left. They're lost back in the glory days of the Black Lives Matter before it became this like Biden election project. They're lost in 2015. They're lost in the glory days of Bernie's 2016 campaign, still feeding off the energy of Occupy. And they don't want to address what's happened in the past 3 years with the pandemic and how that's changed our politics and our society. Washington, D.C., homicides are up over 20%. Why is that? That it doesn't have something to do with the societal.
It definitely doesn't have anything to do with that video I showed you earlier of all the people talking about how they can't afford to live anymore. I'll tell you that.
Deterioration and destabilization of putting people out of work and out of their homes through mass evictions of the lockdowns. He doesn't want to address that. BlackRock seizing up property. Downtown DC is a ghost town now since the lockdowns and the pandemic. It's not coming back. What's coming to downtown DC is extreme poverty, homelessness, crime. BlackRock's buying up distressed commercial real estate. He has no analysis of that. And Jimmy Dore was calling him out. Where have you been? Where are you? Why are you running for president? We're in a different era. This isn't 2015 anymore. Why aren't you attacking Biden as hard as you're attacking Donald Trump? Biden's president. Biden's got us in Ukraine. Biden's sending weapons to Taiwan. So it's completely valid. And Cornel West's response has been that, and to appoint Peter Dow, the guy who was attacking us all, smearing us all back in 2016 on behalf of Hillary's neoliberal campaign that Cornel West had correctly refused to support after Bernie dropped out. Also in 2020, he refused to support it. So you're bringing on this guy who's an obvious grifter. Jimmy said, your advisor must be an infiltrator. And Cornel West said, well, I don't have an advisor. Well, now you do. And he's an infiltrator. And I don't know where the money is coming from to pay him, but he's an infiltrator. He's a clown. He's a grifter. And I don't see any reason. I don't see why the Green Party did this. I mean, Jill Stein, I like her a lot. Respect what she did when she.
So I'm going to stop there. Now I just feel like Max is scolding me. Like, what are you doing?